Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Sharp. Thank you for joining us this morning as we get into the conversations. Well, we'll start our discussion by welcoming my first guest to speak about procurement legislation, particularly amendments and validations to the Bill 2023. Now, my guest expressed concerns over the powers that the Minister of Finance will have, and that is inclusive of the powers of exemptions. Well, that guest is Independent Senator Anthony Vieira, Senior Counsel, and he's with us via Zoom this morning. Hello, sir, and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining me once more, sir. Well, last week, you expressed your concerns over the powers of the Minister of Finance. The bill was eventually passed in the upper house last week, Friday, in the early hours of Friday morning, and yesterday in the House of Representatives. That being said, in the end, you did vote in favor of the amendments and the validations. Your concerns regarding the powers of the Minister of Finance was such addressed, therefore receiving your positive vote.
Yeah, my concerns were met. I had signaled from the outset that in order to get my consent, I felt the minister had to do a couple of things. And my conditions were that the procurement regulator should be in charge of all procurement matters, not the minister, and that he would not have any discretion in terms of spending for the $1 million exemption that they were looking to get. Those two conditions were met. And the third thing that I got, which I think was an achievement, was that during the committee stage, both he and the Attorney General agreed that the exemptions currently cast in the Act, they're just too wide, they're absolute, and that we should come back and temper those exemptions down so that at all times the procurement regulator would have scrutiny over all procurement matters.
Well, before the amendments were actually debated, it was expressed by other individuals, whether it be through the business chambers. I know of one independent senator who expressed concern that this was watering down the bill. In fact, it might do the complete opposite of what the bill achieves or hopes to achieve through accountability. And as you mentioned, the powers of the Office of the Procurement Regulator. But is that exactly what we see taking place now, where the bill is being watered down, where accountability is not going to be as great or as stringent as was previously touted to be?
No, I think the bill before the amendment had a lot more, if you want to put it in other words, had a lot more loopholes in it, because the way the exemptions were cast at 7.6, they were absolute, and also the minister was able to bring these regulations, and he had discretionary spending. Those two things are now being tightened up. Certainly the minister, if you think about it, and the minister is now just a mere conduit. It is the regulator who will bring the regulations. It is the regulator who will determine how monies will be spent or goods disposed of. I think that's a big step. It's tightened the bill substantially.
Now, unfortunately, one thing that has to still be conquered is the fact that there are those out there amongst the citizenry who have expressed mistrust. The mere fact that we've had to have these debates, the mere fact that we've had to have these amendments in order to retroactively approve expenditures, such mistrust has already been expressed amongst the population. But you this morning are saying that you're satisfied, hence the reason why it got your positive vote. How do we now go about expressing that positivity for the understanding to the benefit of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, the mistrust is a very real thing, but we are. Let's step back a bit. We have a procurement regime, and the whole idea behind the procurement regime is to counteract corruption and cronyism and nepotism. So it's fundamental in terms of moving our culture forward. But the procurement regime must not be so straitjacketed that business cannot be done. We can't get things to happen. So it's all about finding that right balance. Now, trust is something that is going to have to be earned over time. And there's a lot of cultural issues here. Let me put it here this way. After all this time, all the lead up to the Procurement Act, all the civil society groups, all the talk about having things in place with procurement when it was to be proclaimed, we still have a very small number of persons who are registered for procurement. It's clear that a lot of the government offices have not really brought themselves up to speed. So what's the sense of having legislation when the people as a whole are not ready to implement it? We have to do a lot of work for this law to really be realized. And in that process, having the right systems in place, having the minister now declare, look, I am hands off. I don't get to say how to spend the money. I don't get to draft any regulations that are convenient to me. I'm a mere conduit. The procurement regulator is in charge. He will determine what regulations will come. If I want to draft a regulation, it has to be with his consent and approval before I can bring it to the parliament. I think that's a step towards having an independent regulator, and I'm hoping that in time trust will come. But we do need to have a lot more work in the field done in bringing people up to speed, bringing all the government offices and state enterprises up to speed with procurement.
But having been on the books for the last 8 years, what excuses could we make for ourselves this morning for that lack of preparedness? I mean, surely there was an understanding that that 8-year period could have been seen as a grace period to set yourselves up to par in order for the procurement regulations, when it comes to pass, that you're prepared. I mean, the office of the procurement regulator was already established.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. Let me put it this way. For many years, I was involved in mediation. Back in the early days, when we were doing mediation, people didn't know the difference between mediation and meditation. And we actually went out there, the mediation board, and took a caravan on the road, speaking to everyone all across the country. It's only now, years later, that I sat in on a 3-day mediation conference that was hosted by the Ministry of Sport and Community Development. And it really warmed my heart to see how finally mediation has been mainstream. People are talking about using alternate dispute resolution, more collaborative approaches. It's going into the schools. But the point I'm trying to make here is that culture doesn't change overnight. You can have the laws down there, but you have to work in the fields. You have to cultivate. Yes, we had all those years to bring ourselves up to speed with procurement, but it wasn't done. And that now needs to happen.
Mm-hmm. You have made some very interesting recommendations, actually, when you stood up and spoke last week. You said you suggest a committee-based approach for certain projects. Could you kindly expand on what you mean by that?
A committee-based approach on certain projects?
Yes.
I'm trying to remember in what context I said that.
Well, you said committees could use a simplified process for procurements under 1 million as opposed to exemptions proposed in the bill. Now, we've moved on from such exemptions.
Yes.
Does the committee-based approach still stand, though?
Well, okay, I remember the point that I had made. So what we have is the government came to get an exemption for $1 million and under for what they say a more nimble regime for smaller sums. And I was very clear that that should not be carte blanche. That regime, while it was needed also to be regulated. And so I made two suggestions. One was one of my own, and one was from former Senator Helen Drayton. The committee-based approach was based on the Central Tenders Board, where in all public offices, committees had been constituted that would have the discretion for the spending within certain criteria. So I was suggesting that in this new exemption, the regulator can pass criteria and he could set up a mechanism so that there would be a committee in all of these public offices based on the Central Tenders Act, whereby they would be able to decide what to spend, how much, in what manner. The other suggestion that made by former Senator Mrs. Drayton was that to give the accounting officers a certain discretion and power. So we were making two suggestions. Now, the procurement office have to draft the regulations for this $1 million and under regime. I don't know what they will come with. I don't know if they will use either my suggestion, Mrs. Drayton's suggestion, or some other mechanism. But the fundamental point was that we didn't want to have, as you have in 7.6, which basically says that this act shall not apply to the following, that exempted 1 million would be absolute, that it's clear because the amendment says subject to regulations. So we wait to see what those regulations will be.
Mm-hmm. And I'm waiting to see what those regulations will be. We cannot say for certain this morning that there is indeed a strong regulatory framework.
No, well, in respect of the $1 million exemption, we don't know what that regulatory framework will be, but there are regulations on other aspects. This is an act where you're going to find repeated types of regulations coming in, right? And so that is why you need to have a very strong, proactive regulator. And it is my hope, and this is what I got from the Attorney General and the Minister of Finance on the floor, that we will close the gap with 7.6. So that things like legal services and accounting services and medical emergency services, that they are not also going to be absolute exemptions, that they too, down the road, should also be made subject to regulations. The regulations may be softer, they may be lighter, but fundamentally for me, everything dealing with procurement should be under the scrutiny of the procurement regulator. And there should be some sort of guideline and criteria under which these things, even if they are exempted, are considered and dealt with.
Senator, in light of what you mentioned previously with regards to the lack of planning, the preparedness even by government bodies in terms of registering under the office of the OPR, that being said, have we seen a demonstration of leadership, as it relates to the Procurement Act? Have we seen examples being set by those in authority, whether it be the government or the judiciary?
Well, hearing what happened since the sitting in the Senate, I get the sense that the government is trying to push all public officers to upping their game. I know some agents in the private sector actually are quite sophisticated with their procurement regime, so they're the trailblazers. But procurement is a must, it's not going away. And so it behoves everyone to understand the procurement regulations, the procurement law. We should have this taught across the board. Even in schools, whether it's in civics, to have people understand that, public funds have to be spent for public purposes for the public good, and they must be accounted for. That is a mantra that we need to get accustomed to. It's a whole sea change culturally. And as you say, the leadership, that leadership has to come from all quarters, from the government, but also from the private sector, from NGOs.
Well, I think my next question, which would have been my concluding question, would have been whether or not people truly understand what procurement is, what disposal of public property is, whether they have an understanding or a firm grasp of this particular bill. And you did mention indeed that there needs to be more efforts in terms of an education drive. So one could only hope that that is the next step, because the reason why we're having these conversations is because of the concerns expressed. Now, there are those who have supported it publicly as well, but not everybody will understand to the extent of the amendments or exactly what is detailed in the bill. So thank you very much, actually, for joining me this morning, Senator Vieira. And one could only hope that that education drive starts soon.
Yes, thank you.
Senator Anthony Vieira joining me this morning speaking about the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Amendment and Validation Bill 2023. Quelling concerns. He expressed concerns during the debate last week Thursday, but he is satisfied by the amendments put forward by the government. The bill was passed in the early hours of the upper chamber last week Friday morning and yesterday by the House of Representatives. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break here on AM Prime. When we return, we'll get into some more conversations this morning. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the program, and thank you for making time to join us this morning. Well, Jack Warner is back. He made his appearance last night at a political platform hosted by the United National Congress and the National Transformation Alliance at the Centre of Excellence in Mokoya at a packed house. Now, rumours were circulating after a photo of Jack Warner and Khadija Amin was posted to social media last week. Khadija Amin indeed confirmed that Jack Warner was back, and last night we heard from him for the very first time. Now, he wore a yellow shirt, but not the UNC symbol, saying that he has to earn that right. And when he does so, he will call an executive meeting of the ILP, the Independent Liberal Party for which he formed, to disband it and join forces with the United National Congress. Well, to have a conversation around the arrival, I suppose the welcoming back of Jack Warner, I'm joined by the United National Congress's Public Relations Officer, no stranger to the show or to the station, Dr. Kirk Mayu. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the program.
Good morning to you and also to your viewers.
Well, thank you very much for joining me, sir. I could imagine all that happened last night. Waking up to join me this morning is indeed a bit difficult, but thank you nonetheless. So, what is interesting is this back and forth. There's been a great support within the public domain welcoming Jack Warner back to the party, but there have also been concerns expressed. It's been noted that Jack Warner has previously said that in our collective lifetimes, Kamala Persad-Bissessou will never be Prime Minister again. In 2020, he says that the UNC will lose the 2025 general election. This is just about 3 years ago. What has led to this change of heart?
Well, I mean, I can't necessarily speak for Mr. Warner himself in terms of, those specifics, but generally from his address last night, which was a very, very heartfelt address. I mean, it was emotional. The electricity, felt if you were there, and hopefully that was conveyed through the live streams and so forth, which can be seen on our UNC pages and YouTube pages when you to review. But he said that this country right now is, at the point of staring down an abyss, that we are at the precipice, that this country has been so terribly mismanaged by this corrupt incompetent PNM regime that we have to get together. We have to put the country first, and whatever happened in the past, whatever our personal grievances, whatever there was before, has to be put aside. We cannot let our own personal hurt, our own personal egos, our own wounded selves to prevent the progress of this country. And we all need to come together because we are at a very, very critical point. And this is much more than a local government election. This is an election, the first stage in saving and securing our country.
Coming together is one way of looking at it. Yes, we did indeed see former People's Partnership ministers last night. We saw the opposition leader was Prime Minister Gary Griffith, former National Security Minister. Jack Warner, he was referred to last night as former National Security Minister. He said that he was the best minister who works on transport this country has ever seen. Is it that we're still stuck in 2010? Is it that the People's Partnership is still stuck in 2010?
Well, if we're stuck in 2010, that's a great place to be stuck in. What it is that we are remembering a time when this country was on its way to reducing crime to its lowest rate in over a decade, where our cost of living, where even though the world was experiencing the aftermath of the great, what was it called then? The recession, the Great Recession, and the crash of 2008, we were still able to survive through that. We had infrastructure, we had all sorts of new social programs, of new educational programs, of new initiatives. We performed the best ever in terms of Olympic medals and sports and in every area you could think of. We had the best SEA results ever. It was almost in every area of life. We were poised at that point in 2010 to achieve over that period of time. And yes, there is that desire to go back to a time where we were proven to deliver a country at a much, much, much better place than we are today, where everything in every single area of life has just broken down.
Mr. Jack Warner referred to Kamla Persad-Bissessar as the best prime minister that this nation has ever seen, calling her the Mandela of local politics. Now, he is regarded as the catalyst behind Kamla Persad-Bissessar's success in the leadership elections back in 2009, and also the catalyst behind gathering all support for her following that victory leading up to the elections in 2010. Is it that it is hoped that it'll be a similar thing that will be achieved now that Jack Warner is back in the party because of the support that he does have amongst the grassroots supporters, that he will once more gather that level of support for Kamla Persad-Bissessar?
Oh, absolutely. Anybody who comes into the party is for. I mean, we expect that politics is not just about addition; it's about multiplication. It's not just about arithmetic; it's about changing the chemistry. And Jack Warner will certainly do that. We believe. He brings tremendous support. He has, he has this tremendous capacity for work, this tremendous capacity to get things done, this tremendous connection with people. I mean, again, you could have seen it through the video, and if you were there last night, you would have felt it. It was live, palpable. It was like you could touch it. That connection he has with the people, and he himself said, had he known that he was going to receive a reception like that, why didn't he do so sooner? That sort of energy will certainly translate into what we need to transform the country. It is not only about the sort of narrow political goal of giving support for the party so that we win at the polls. We want to win at the polls for a reason, because we want to save the country, repair what has been broken, and build it up again to where we should be.
But what does this say about the younger generation of politicians? We are once more bringing those who have been at the helm before, those who were in the past and left politics for quite some time. What does this say about the quality of the younger politicians and the future leaders? Is it that bringing back these older heads are sacrificing their potential?
I don't think so at all, because there are a number of things. One is that just the natural process is that people get older, they don't live forever, that everybody naturally is on their way out. All of us, you are, I am, all of us. And they certainly are. They're not coming to steal anybody's seats or to take anybody, to take anybody's place. In fact, what they're doing is they are bringing their experience. They are helping and guiding the younger people. And if you look at the parliament, if you look at the lineup of the councillors we've chosen for candidates, the MPs who are in parliament already, it is a very young crew. And in fact, people were quarreling about the other way before. They were saying you're getting rid of too many old people, you're getting rid of too many, and you're bringing in too many new people, right? But now that some of the older partners are coming back, it's not to take anything away from the new people we've brought into the parliament and are bringing in to the local government sphere. In fact, as Ms. Prasad Besessa said yesterday, people are working up through the ranks, instead of parachuting from above. We're not parachuting anybody in from above. She said so quite explicitly yesterday. And really what this is to provide more support, more historical and institutional memory that a lot of the young people don't have. And so it can only strengthen the youth and younger members of the party.
Mm-hmm. Now, I can get into all the quotations of the back and forth between Jacques Gouin and Kamla Prasad-Besessa of years gone by. I will refrain from doing such. I listened to him speak on the platform last night. I listened to what he had to say. I listened to the opposition leader as well. And it seems as though that has been put aside for now because of fighting a common enemy. In fact, I'll quote from David Lee, who says that everyone is an asset in getting rid of this government. So then, is it that quotation, that famous quotation, that is being played out here now? The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
I don't think that I would say that we were enemies before. As in yesterday, yes, there was a fallout. Yes, it was bitter. Yes, some harsh words were said. I think in everybody's life, perhaps one can remember when they were falling out and then coming back together. And this is coming back together for the cause of rescuing Trinidad and Tobago. It's not just, this is not motivated by negativity. It's not motivated by just wanting to get the PNM. That's not what it's about. This is about saving our country. This is motivated by extreme concern about where our country is right now. It is motivated by a love for this country. It is motivated by a concern about where our children are going to be, are growing up right now, and what future they have. That's what this is about. And that any harsh words, any hurts, any wrongdoings that may have occurred in the past, that we have to put those aside, resolved to do better for our country, for ourselves, for our children's future. That is what the motivation is. And as in one's personal life, one must do that in order to progress rather than negativity of the past, or else you'll never move forward. And that's what we have to do in the politics as well.
Now, If that be the case, as you mentioned, is it that we're also putting aside for the moment the baggage that Mr. Warner carries with him, or is currently carrying with him?
Well, again, those issues are issues that Mr. Warner has to deal with. And as I said, what he is doing is he is providing support for the party so that we can transform this country, we can rescue the country, secure Trinidad and Tobago. And Mr. Warner's issues that he is dealing with, he has to deal with that with under due process of law, and he is dealing with that. And as he is also giving support for this. As he said, he just cannot sit by and do nothing while our country is falling apart, which it has been over the past 8 years, as I said, in every area of government. And we must welcome all efforts, all genuine reaching out for support, and we will support them.
Now, MP David Lee further mentioned that Mr. Jack Warner has been working with local government election candidates. How long has this relationship been ongoing behind closed doors? How long has he been working with local government election candidates? And what capacity, what role does Jack Warner now play amongst this, I suppose, new political front?
Well, right now, things are not in any formalized way. From the beginning of the campaign, from before the campaign, you remember Ms. Prasad Basesa put out the call for everybody to come back home, for everybody to work together again, and let's put aside everything, basically. She has been saying this for months and months and months. I'm probably over a year now. And actually I believe there were pictures circulating, certainly on social media. I can't remember if it was in the national media, during one of our carnival fetes. I believe it was a choker fete at the Center of Excellence. Jack Warner was there, and we did have, and that was sort of the beginning of a thawing out, of a rapprochement, and then as we were building up towards the local government elections, and we were forcing the PNM to call it, as they illegally were postponing it, we were talking to other people. People were responding. And so we had these talks, we had these calls going on since then in terms of Jack Warner working with the candidates. I mean, that's happened because when we planned our meetings and schedules with the NTA, Jack Warner had expressed his interest to come aboard. Garvin Nicholas as well, has put his support. They're not, the MND is not giving candidates. So it's been something that's emerging. It's not something that is set out in stone. So Jack Warner has been, when we planned this, because we did plan this for a few weeks now, but so when we planned this, he was on board, but it hadn't been made public. And so he was lending his support where he could at that level. And as I said, this is something that it's not set in stone. Nothing has been asked. Nothing has been promised. It is something that we are working out right now in terms of what he can, what he can possibly give, and what we and how we can best work together. And who knows who else is going to be coming on board. So let me just put that. So this is a dynamic situation. It's not over. I would have to say the process of people coming back, of unification, of the forces expanding, it's actually continuing. So we can't actually set anything in stone otherwise.
You just mentioned that conversations are ongoing. I mean, you've even given a hint of who knows? There may be more people very soon who will be appearing on the platform. But conversations about what Mr. Warner can give, and in your opinion, what can he give to the United National Congress and the NTA?
Absolutely. Mr. Warner is known for being a workhorse. Mr. Warner is known for getting things done. Mr. Warner is known for being relentless in terms of when he focuses on something and he wants to get something done, he will put in 110%, 1000% to do that. He will not sleep. He will just, and when there are obstacles, he will figure out a way to make sure that, well, what we need to get done gets done. That sort of drive, that sort of energy, that sort of intensity is on the operational side very, very, very important and inspiring to others as well. And then in terms of the support and the love, and that itself, that sort of work ethic, that sort of drive to get things done for the people has earned him this reputation and this love among the people themselves. And and so that magnetism that he brings, that we saw yesterday, that we witnessed, that we felt, it was palpable. He certainly brings that. He certainly brings that. The roar of the crowd when he came on the stage took him aback. So that is definitely what he brings.
Is there a recognition that people are becoming or are already apathetic to politics, and so there is a need for this sort of invigoration, as you've so put it?
I think yes, there is a cynicism in the country regarding politics, and to be fair, politics has engendered cynicism among many. I also think that the way politics is often presented by others to create a sort of cynicism, and so which is very unfortunate, because politics is the most important thing for running our country, especially in a small country like ours. Everything in this country eventually is related to politics. Because of the nature of our small society and the role of government in our society, it is absolutely essential for us to be involved in politics. And the cynicism that has been engendered very often by the sort of intellectual class or the kind of aloof class, the scribes, who may have it good no matter who is in power. And then they come up with this very empirically falsifiable idea that both parties are the same. It doesn't matter if you vote, if you don't vote. That is absolutely not true by any measure, right? And that being involved in politics is very, very, very important. And I say to people, if there are things that you would like to see improved, that you don't like, then the way to change it is to get involved, have some skin in the game, be there and be the change you want to see, and start to advocate for the change by being inside there. You can't by just sitting outside and complaining and saying everybody's the same and nothing's going to change. That is a recipe for stasis, for the status quo to remain. We all have to get involved. And if we want to see things done differently, it's going to have to be up to us to see it change to what we want it to change to be.
Mm-hmm. I mean, fair point, Dr. Mayhew. However, the United National Congress has not changed. You still have a political leader that has lost multiple elections in the helm, and there have been those who were there previously who have expressed their concerns over that. So the UNC hasn't really changed much. Therefore, are you saying that if you want to make change, don't sit on the fence, come on board, be a part of it? Jack Warner said the same thing last night. He says there are those out there who are critical, but they sit on the fence. They don't actually do anything. So if we are speaking about change this morning, If the UNC hasn't changed, how could it be a catalyst for change?
That's absolutely wrong. The UNC has changed. I mean, look at the MPs and the Parliament from 2015 to 2020. Massive changes that people thought would never happen, and in fact, unfortunately, many people have not taken that well. They've taken it as in a personal way, and instead of uh, accepting the political processes and working with the party, they've been very bitter. Hopefully, our call that the leader has been making for about a year will start to gain momentum. But yeah, there has been many changes. When you look at the local government, so many changes. Even the even myself, I joined the party just in 2020, and I have been in my own way trying to make my contribution to the party, and there are people that I see coming in and who have come in, a lot of young people, many people um, who are not known nationally, but the new people are coming in all the time, and it's quite amazing, and they are enthusiastic, and they also want to contribute to the evolution of the party, right? Because we don't want to change the party, because the foundation of the party is what we believe in, the principles that you see in the Constitution in terms of inclusion, in terms of national economic diversification, in terms of the inclusion of the working class, of the small businesses, in terms of civil rights and people's human rights. These things are the foundation of the UNC. The unity of the people, the recognition of all the marginalized cultures. We don't want to change that at all, right? We want to invigorate that, and we want to bring in new blood and new energy to translate that for this current generation and the future generation. And that is the process that has been occurring.
Can the United National Congress win an election by itself? With Kamla Bissassa as the political leader of the United National Congress, can they win an election on its own without the assistance or without the inclusion of other political entities?
Absolutely. I mean, and the trend, the trend has been showing that. I mean, in 2020, it was only 2,600 votes in 2 seats that separated us from government. And the trend was that we have been gaining votes since 2015 in the local government elections and in the national election. In 2019, the last local government election, the UNC received more votes than all other parties combined. Right? In 2020, a lot of the smaller parties, well, all the smaller parties and independents, there were actually 20 of them. Right, so that includes, the ILP of Jack Warner and the COP and the PEP and, all, was it Nikolai Edwards and, all there were 20 of them, and all together they couldn't even get 5% of the vote. And the PNM have been losing votes when you look at it from 2015. 2019, 2020, they have been on a downward trend, and there's nothing indicating that they are on any upward trend at all. And we have been building up. And since 2020 to now, we definitely have closed that gap of 2,600 votes in St. Joseph and San Fernando West. Certainly, we know we've closed that and secured our majority. But this process of inviting people back is more than about political arithmetic and securing a majority. It really is about bringing all hands on deck, because there are a lot of talented people. There are a lot of intelligent, innovative persons in the smaller parties that that weren't able to get together even 5% of the vote last time. But we want to give them an opportunity to get involved in mainstream politics, and not just the politics of complaint, but actually involved in the politics of reconstruction, the politics of rebuilding Trinidad and Tobago. And because that is what we need, because as I've said before, the PNM have really destroyed every area of life. The democracy itself, in terms of the separation of powers, in terms of the calling of elections, and then the economy, the infrastructure, the education, the crime and security, all these things have been just damaged so badly that we want all hands on deck. We need all hands on deck. We can win it by ourselves, but this transformation, this rescuing that's needed, requires everybody to come on board.
Well, Dr. Cook Mayo, thank you very much for joining me for this extensive interview this morning. I appreciate your time and for sharing this with us. And well, you've hinted at more people walking on that platform, so I know that all media houses as well as the public will be looking at that. But for now, all the very best in the campaign, and all the very best to you and the rest of the team.
Thank you, and have a great day to you and your viewers as well.
Thank you very much, sir. All the best. Take care.
All right.
Dr. Cook Mayhew, Public Relations Officer of the United National Congress, joining me this morning. Indeed, when Jack Warner made his way to the political platform last night, the reception he received was very much electrifying and energetic. And he, as I mentioned at the beginning of this interview, he did not wear a UNC logo on his yellow shirt. He says he has to earn that right. He's referred to Kamla Persad-Visasa as the Mandela of local politics. He then went on to respond to Stuart Young, Minister Stuart Young's offer to buy him a first-class ticket to Miami. He responded to Marvin Gonzalez, who said he'll give him a red card, as well as Juliet Avis, who, well, according to Mr. Warner, allegedly insulted him on radio station yesterday. So election season is certainly kicking up, and elections are around the corner. Today is the 25th of July. Remember, the polling stations open from 6 a.m. on August the 14th. Ladies and gentlemen, we take a break here on AM Prime for WESN's News on the Hour. When we return, we'll get into some more conversations this morning. Stay tuned to the program. Welcome back to AM Prime, ladies and gentlemen. The last lap of this morning's edition. We're speaking about an anti-government campaign that is being launched by the Oilfield Workers Trade Union, a campaign against the PNM, calling on people to vote against them in the August 14th local government elections. That is, if they do not implement policies to protect workers. Now, I'm joined this morning by the Point-a-Peer branch president of the OWTU, Mr. Christopher Jackman. He's with us via Zoom. Hello, sir. Welcome to the program.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, Mr. Jackman, thank you for joining me. Well, you have stated that you will push politically a campaign that identifies all the sins of the government. What are all the sins of the government that you speak of?
All right, that's a very long list. If I have to focus on the ones that are most important, I would say the health and welfare of employees in the workplace right now is most under threat. We have multiple examples. We saw what took place in Paria, where we would have had 4 persons who would have lost their lives in a pipeline. Coming out of that incident, the family members are still awaiting some sort of justice, some sort of compensation for their loss. Imagine that. You, as a breadwinner of your family, would have left your house, gone to work, lost your life for that company, and then your family now has to suffer, inclusive of your wife and children. That is unacceptable. We're also seeing now another big thing in Trinidad that not much people are talking about, our fuel prices was a big point of focus some years ago. One fact that not much people may know is that right now we are paying more for fuel than the United States, right? It seems to be less, but when you convert the price per gallon to price per liter, our price for premium is actually more expensive than the United States of America. Right now, we would have gotten confirmation from the government that they would be floating the fuel price. And as the oil price reduces, our fuel prices locally will reduce. But that has yet to happen. And we all know the higher the fuel price, the higher the cost of living. And again, cost of living is not an improving situation for workers in this country, because we know and we can see clearly that negotiations for many employees across this country are being limited to 4%. In fact, some people haven't seen an increase for the last 5 years. So times are definitely getting harder. But our biggest concern right now as a union is the fact that workers now are afraid to speak out for fear of losing their jobs, and are willing to live and work in circumstances that are risking their lives, right? And afraid to speak, so we have to speak out. And what we are calling for is at least for the government to implement some sort of policy to take care of our family members in the event of our passing on the job. Now, yes, we have workmen's compensation, but we have to be real. Some companies out there are not paying workmen's compensation for their employees. So more has to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And as a union, it is our responsibility to defend the interests of workers.
Now, before we go further into this particular campaign, do unions understand that if economic activity and overall the economy shrink, that things will get difficult, but salaries would not be able to increase?
Well, let's put it at this: there needs to be balance, right? We have to understand that a government is elected to ensure the country functions properly, and the interests of the persons who would have supported that party are looked after, right? So as a government is in power, their focus cannot only be on the business class, on the rich and wealthy, because come election time, that is the only time where the government tends to understand the importance of the people who elect them, right? So while, yes, the unions pay particular attention to ensure the economic impact, to be aware of the economic impact of salary increases, we also have to understand that as everything goes up, our purchasing power reduces, and there must be balance.
Moving forward now, the policies with respect to the safety of workers, has the OWT outlined the policies that it sees fit or necessary for the government to implement?
Right. Well, what I can say to that is that we've been calling for a while now through NTAC and through other means to update the labor laws in this country. But updating labor laws always tends to be the last priority. It always tends to be what is put on the back burner until probably election time. What we would like to see as a union is strict enforcement of safety policies for all our members that we represent. So, for example, ensuring that companies are held responsible if they don't pay the necessary insurance coverages that they have to put in place for their workers. There needs to be harsh and stricter penalties in place for persons who don't cover their workmen's compensation and their NIS payments. Much stricter enforcement on that, right? To the point where if an incident occurs and there's no coverage in place for employees, then we should be looking at fines, and even if I would go as far as to say jail time. Also, we've had examples of companies closing any pass, leaving the country, and not providing compensation for workers when they shut the company down. That is also unacceptable. And some sort of protection needs to be put in place for that, so that companies cannot just leave here and ignore their financial obligations to the workers.
Do you have any examples of such companies, Mr. Jackman? It'll be interesting
Yeah.
to know.
For example, Metal Steel, right? That would have been within the tenure of this government as well. When the steel mill would have closed, they would have left this country, and if I'm not mistaken, it's about 1,500 workers would have lost their jobs, and not one of them would have received a payment or severance. So imagine you working in a company for 20 years, and because of, for whatever reason maybe, the company chooses to close their operations and leave the country. And for 20 years service, you don't receive a cent of severance, right? That would mean that the last 20 years, apart from receiving your salary, you now have to go on the job market without a buffer, right? For 20 years service. That happened in Trinidad and Tobago. And the government did nothing.
Are you making the argument that, and I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be a new argument coming from unions, but that the PNM government, or this current PNM government, that is anti-worker?
I wouldn't say it's an argument. What I would say is that workers are the last priority on the list. The Prime Minister himself would have said that the rich should get richer, and coming out of that, the poor would get, I mean, I'm using my words here, the poor would receive, I'm guessing, employment and compensation from the rich getting richer. So we're seeing a mindset here of a Prime Minister that prioritizes the business class and a Prime Minister that prioritizes the rich, right? And we are in a country where around election time, we all know it's silly season, and it's around election time that you'll see the government now choosing to pave roads or to offer things to people. In fact, I'm very, very sure that for the workers we represent, expatriate workers, that sometime soon you'll be seeing goodies passed out to the expatriate workers for their support in San Fernando and Marabella and Point Fortin. For example, we're hearing that they're planning to distribute land to Petrotrin workers again now. Again, they will make you feel as though they're giving land to all Petrotrin workers, but we have in excess of 5,000 workers, and every time election comes about, they'll want to distribute about 15 lots of land, right? That is less than 1% of our membership, right? But they will sell that now while saying that they are doing something for the expatriate workers. And I would also like to highlight here, we have over 600 persons. This is again to prove the anti-worker sentiment. 600 persons who would have left the company with not a cent of severance. And that, I don't know if you all remember, the former chairman of Petrotrin, Mr. Wilfred Espinay, would have made the infamous statement that some will have to suffer in this country. And as a result of that, we now are left fighting for over 5 years to try to get compensation for those 600 plus workers. Right? So it's clear to me that this is a government that does not prioritize the interests of workers. And we need to highlight that through this country until they understand the importance of it. And maybe it may take the removal of this government and installation of another one who understands and better appreciates the interests of workers for them to learn their lesson.
Well, people will be waking up this morning and reading that there's a possibility that unions will be joining the United National Congress. In fact, the OWTU, you're quoted as saying the OWTU will do what it has to make sure that the Rowley government is removed. Is that also in the interest of the OWTU from your branch in joining with the opposition party at this time?
Well, what I can say is that I speak on behalf of the point-of-pay branch of the OWTU, right? And we have already, through my members, would have made a decision that we will be supporting the UNC campaign this election. The workers believe that because of the hardship that we currently face and because of the appeals of the last 5 years falling on deaf ears, right, that it has become necessary for there to be a change in this government for us to see justice for the issues that we currently fight, right? So we have already begun supporting the opposition party. We have already begun mobilizing our members and informing our members of what we are currently fighting and the challenges that we are facing with this government and what we believe is the correct way forward, right? And I am doing what I'm doing because I see it as necessary only at this point in time to push the interests of our members. First and foremost, this is not me being a UNC, this is not me being a PEP, this is me being OWTU Blue. I will forever be blue. And at this point in time, it is in our interest to support the opposition. I believe every worker in this country needs to focus their attention now on removing this government from power.
In your interest or politically convenient?
Well, let's be real. In terms of politics, in terms of what we currently face, it is definitely in our interest to do so. For the last 5 years, we've been waiting for some information on the restart of the refinery. We've heard nothing. For the last 5 years, we've had over 13 matters wrapped up in the courts. And everything that can be done to delay those court matters are currently being done. And to add insult to injury, we now see workers working in the environment. And almost on every 3-6 months, we're hearing some serious injury, persons losing their legs, persons being burnt alive, persons being sucked in pipelines. So the industry has now become so much more dangerous, solely because the standards in the workplace would have dropped, and workers are now afraid to speak out when they see safety issues, when they see breaches in the workplace, for fear that they'll be penalized, branded as a unionist, and fired from the job. Mm-hmm. Right? So the energy sector has now become ever so much more dangerous. And it is definitely in our interest to remove this government from power. It's not about convenience, it's interest.
As well, as far as I'm aware, and perhaps you can correct me on this, there's not been a sitting administration of which the unions have not had an issue with. I mean, the relationship seems good before the election, and then a couple of years into the administration, unions say, all right, no longer taking this, no longer standing for this, we're going to vote the next political party. It's a constant back and forth cycle. This is nothing new. So what's to say it's going to be different?
Well, at the end of the day, we know for the last 8 years that, yes, we can safely say that life in Trinidad and Tobago has gotten harder for the working class. And we can't reward a government. We can't reward them with winning elections if we know that over the last 8 years, they have ignored all of our requests, all of our interests, all of our matters, right? They need to be removed. And while in Trinidad and Tobago, yes, we don't have much options in terms of political parties. At this point in time, we have had discussions with different political parties, and we have received commitments from some of those parties, right? So we, as would have been done in the past, will choose the option to remove the current and go with one that will represent our interests. So maybe, again, yes, we may fall out with them in the future, but we expect that coming out of the support that we give, that some of our interests will be advanced. Mm-hmm. It may not be all, but some is better than none. And right now, they are pushing us to the point of death and collapse, right? So this is absolutely necessary. Mm-hmm. Right, I've only touched on some of the issues. We have issues with our pensions. We have issues with our medical. The list goes on and on.
Mm-hmm. Well, you said that you're pushing to remove the government should they not implement the policies of which you've spoken of. Hypothetically speaking now, there are two scenarios. One, if the government implements some of the policies before the election, they have 3 weeks to do so. It's highly unlikely that would happen. But if they were to do that, does this anti-government campaign end?
That is an answer that I'd like to keep in my, as the politicians say, in my back pocket, right? But at this point in time, the answer will be we have a lot of issues to address, right? At this point in time, over the last 8 years, I highly doubt that any of these issues will be addressed, right? But if they do, then some consideration, yes, will have to be given. Some will have to be given. At the end of the day, we are not a political entity. We represent the interests of our workers. And that is all we want to see. We want to see justice for each and every one of our members and their lives improved. At this point in time, we're not seeing that anywhere on the horizon.
Well, not to get into the theories of politics, I sometimes wonder what's the difference between a union and a political party. But we will save that for another day. However, the second hypothetical scenario that I was going to ask you is following the local government elections on August 14th, if the government were to address these issues and implement policies, would there be a pro-government campaign for 2025?
There'll be no campaign. There'll be no campaign. Our intention is not to support a political party. Our intention is to support the interests that will to support our interests. And at the end of the day, we will do what is necessary to ensure that our interests are achieved. So we don't support a party for supporting a party's sake. At this point in time, we are choosing to support a party, as in the opposition party, because we see absolutely no hope of our matters being addressed under this government.
But Mr. Jackman, you do understand, though, that by having an anti-government campaign, that, in a way, actually supports a political party, which is the opposition.
My point is, we don't support a party for supporting a party's sake. We support a party for the furtherance of our interests. So if it is for 8 years, we see one policy being addressed by the PNM, in my opinion, that is not enough for us to throw our support behind them. Again, we will have to speak with our members to have some strategic discussions on that. But at this point in time, we have been over 8 years, this government would have been in power. 5 of those years, we would have been fighting to have some matters addressed out of the closure. And of those 5 years, we have been pushed aside, we have been ignored. In fact, you would have seen recently, we would have tried to advance one of our court matters by delivering a letter in Port of Spain, and we would have been jolted by police. So what we're seeing here is a straightforward case of the government absolutely not caring about resolving any of our issues. And as a result of that, we will do what we have to do to remove them from power. It's not about us supporting the UNC because we favor the UNC, we are members of the UNC. This is about us supporting the UNC so that we can get the PNM out of power and have the UNC address some of our issues. Right? So it's not normal. It's not normal for us as a branch to throw our support behind a political party. Right?
Well, let me ask you now, in terms of strategy, you use that term strategy. What is the branch? Because please clarify for me whether or not it's just this particular branch of the OWTU that's embarking on this campaign, or if it is the OWTU as a union in its entirety. But what is the strategy to get your message across? What is your strategy in executing this campaign?
All right, good question. So yes, this is an initiative of the branch, right? There are many different branches of the OWTU, but again, every branch will have their members, and the members will be the ones that will direct the strategy of the branch, right? So we are former ex-Petrotrin workers that belong to the Point-A-Pay refinery, and our members would have made this call. Now, again, I need to be careful with this statement here. We don't make decisions and we don't proceed in certain directions without consensus. All right. So let that just clarify some things there. So even though our members would have made the call, we also had to have discussions strategically with persons from a certain level within the union, right? Now, the strategy going forward for me is a strategy of building alliances and reaching out to different institutions throughout the country, as well as internationally in some cases, to highlight the plights of workers in this country, from the issues of salary increases and cost of living to the issues of fuel prices and promises being made to reduce the fuel prices, but nothing done so far. Well, when I say reduce, I should say float. I don't want anybody to accuse me of misdirecting or trying to twist anything. So prices are supposed to be floated in comparison with the oil price. That has yet to happen, right? We also, the most troubling one to the branch would be the state of fear that workers currently operate to report HSE issues. So, companies always claim that HSE is the number one priority. But from what we see now in the energy sector, lives are being lost at a very concerning rate. Something needs to be done to address that, as well as coverage for in the event of loss of life. The issues of the families must be urgently addressed. If not, companies need to be held accountable, right? So the strategy will be to reach out to certain institutions in the country, to reach out to workers in the country, and push that agenda to educate them about what the PNM really represents when it comes to your interests, right? So we would have already started that, as well as forming alliances with political parties and getting commitments from them as to what our interests are and what we would like to see come out of it should you win the general election in 2025.
Mr. Jackman, thank you very much for joining me this morning on AM Prime. Well, let's see what happens over the next couple of weeks and next couple of months, and there may be a need to have further discussions over this campaign. By the way, has the campaign actually started?
Yes. All right. So what we've done thus far, I don't wanna give out too much, but we have already started in the Marabella and San Fernando areas, and this week we'll be moving our campaign to Cuba. Now, how we walk the ground, and we know where our members are, and we know how to reach out to them directly. So we've started on the ground, and we started reaching out to our members. And now what we're looking to do this week is to start to reach out to various institutions throughout this country, inclusive of unions and some business entities.
Mr. Jackman, thank you very much for joining me on the program this morning and for sharing this with us. I hope things work out for all involved, for all of Trinidad and Tobago involved, and should the need be, there is a part two to this conversation. But for now, all the best to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, enjoy it.
You too, sir. Mr. Christopher Jackman, representative of the Point of Pay branch of the OWTU, joining us this morning here on AM Prime. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for this edition of the program. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for making the time to be with us this morning. I'm Keaton Shaw, wishing you a grand day ahead. And from tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., we'll see you for AM Prime. Bye-bye.